Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of James. We're still in James chapter 1. In our last couple of sessions, we've been looking at verses 13 and 14, in which James warns us about temptation. Now, he reminded us, of course, that no temptation comes from God, but that temptation arises when our desires become distorted or twisted and evil and lead us in ways we should not go. And those kind of evil desires can entice us into sinful actions which lead to death, spiritual death. So James is giving us a warning about bewaring of temptation and guarding our hearts against our desires becoming distorted and evil and leading us into sin. He clearly wants us to be on guard so that we can resist the lure of temptation. Now, before we move on to the next paragraph, anytime I read these verses from James, I'm also reminded of a verse from the book of 1 Corinthians, where the Apostle Paul talks about a similar thing, about when temptations come and how we must be on our guard and resist them. It's from 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 12 and 13. And here the Apostle Paul, as James, is talking about temptation, and he tells us how to resist it, and how to guard against it, how to stand against it. So let's see what the Apostle Paul has to say in regard to temptation, and we kind of link this with what James has said in chapter 1. So we're in 1 Corinthians 10, verses 12 and 13. And Paul says, "Now, if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you do not fall." So it's a warning to the Christians to guard your heart. You think you're standing firm, but temptations can come. So be careful that you do not fall into them. He goes on to say, "Now no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind." In other words, our desires becoming twisted or distorted, leading us to sin, is quite common in this fallen world. So no temptation has overtaken you except that which is common to mankind. God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way so that you can endure it. In other words, God does not tempt us, that's clear, but he understands our situation. And whenever temptation comes, God will be faithful to us. He will provide what we need to resist the temptation, to stand firm. No temptation will come that can overpower us if we'll simply depend on God. No temptation will come that is irresistible if we will simply depend on God. Our Lord is faithful. He will never tempt us, but what he does do is to provide a way of escape for us. He provides the grace we need and the strength we need and the faith we need to stand against temptation and to continue to walk in his way. So in other words, know that God will always be faithful to you. Yes, temptations will come. Yes, they will. You will be tempted, but God is always with you. And his grace is always sufficient. And if you'll simply lean on him, if you simply keep your eyes on the Lord, he will provide what you need to stand firm, to stand strong, to resist temptation, and not to fall. Temptations will come, they will, but we don't have to fall into them. We don't have to allow them to lead us in wrong ways. We don't have to fall into sin. We don't. God will provide what we need to stand firm. James warns us about temptation. But coupled with what Paul says, he also lets us know God is faithful. He'll always provide exactly what you need. Keep leaning on him. Keep depending on him. Keep your spiritual gaze on the Lord. And as long as you stand firm in him, he will provide exactly what you need, when you need it, to stand against temptation. It's wonderful to know that God is always faithful, and he's promised he'll provide what we need, and we know God's promises are always reliable. We can always resist the temptation, always, if we'll depend on the Lord and lean by faith on him. Hope you join us tomorrow as we continue our 5-minute Bible study in the book of James.